Good. Back. All right, let me check the audio real quickly here. Check, 1, 2. All good. Let's get started with this evening's readings. Let's see. And we left off on the 5th. All right. So we can start. There's a few articles this week, so I'll try to read along quickly and do a quick comment or analysis after the read and see if anybody else comments. If not, we move along. Again, just a reminder, this is non-monetized, ad-free read-along, just for personal and general learning and journaling, I guess. Anyone's welcome to join. The read-along is usually on current events, mostly taken from the Liberation News articles. Free feel to donate to them if you want to support the cause. If not, it's totally fine. All right. Oh, and I have no affiliation with them. I'm just reading along because of personal interest, and I'm a leftist. So, all right. So here, first article for tonight is 6-week abortion ban takes effect in Florida and Arizona. Total ban repealed. In both states, organizers put abortion rights on the ballot. By Sarah Brummett, May 5th. A 6-week abortion ban has taken effect in Florida just 30 days after the April 1st Florida Supreme Court ruling that rejected legal challenges to the 15-week ban already in place. While a major blow to abortion access, the movement for reproductive rights has stepped up the fight, placing a measure on the November ballot to codify abortion rights in the state's constitution, collecting over 1 million signatures. Meanwhile, in Arizona, 2 Republican lawmakers broke ranks and voted to repeal an 1864 abortion ban law, reflecting that a true majority of people support access to abortion. Meanwhile, Arizona abortion rights activists are also placing a measure on the ballot for November to codify access to this important medical procedure. The 15-week abortion ban in Florida was signed into law in 2022, but faced legal challenges in Florida courts. For decades, Florida courts have protected abortion rights under a broad interpretation of privacy protection in the state's constitution. However, on April 1st, the right-wing Florida Supreme Court rejected that long-standing interpretation, opting to uphold the 15-week ban. This decision also triggered the more recent 6-week ban, signed into law in April 2023, to take effect on May 1st, just 30 days after the ruling. The ruling by Florida Supreme Court comes just 2 years after the outrageous and broadly unpopular repeal of Roe v. Wade by the U.S. Supreme Court, mirroring similar statistics across the country. Over 65% of Floridians polled indicate support for abortion rights, a clear majority of the population. However, as the Dobbs decision demonstrated, these courts do not exist to promote the popular nor protect the interest of working-class people. Instead, they are anti-democratic institutions which serve to advance reactionary attacks on our hard-earned rights. Florida's latest ban is a major blow to regional abortion access. The ruling is a devastating blow for abortion rights in Florida. Across the South until now, Florida has remained the closest point of access for abortion services for many women seeking abortion across the South. Similar 6-week bans have already been in effect in South Carolina and Georgia, while total bans are in place in many other states in the region, including Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama. Now, the nearest point of access for abortion beyond 6 weeks gestation in the entire South is North Carolina, which allows abortions only until 12 weeks. A 6-week ban is effectively a total ban on abortion, as most pregnancies are still undetected at such an early stage. For those who are able to catch their pregnancies before 6 weeks, the logistical challenges of getting an appointment at and traveling to a clinic in Florida in time to legally get an abortion are likely to be insurmountable for many. In fact, even before the 6-week abortion ban took effect, these challenges to abortion access have been exceedingly difficult for working class people across the South to overcome due to high levels of poverty, poor transportation infrastructure, lack of job benefits, including paid sick leave, and lack of childcare. Taking the fight for abortion rights to the people. Instead of relying on empty campaign promises from the Democratic Party, which has failed to codify abortion rights into the law for decades, Florida activists have taken matters into their own hands. Since the 2022 Dobbs decision, grassroots organizations to defend and expand abortion access have developed across the state. In 2023, these organizations collaborated to build, quote, Floridians Protecting Freedom, end quote, a robust campaign to get abortion on the ballot this coming November. The campaign collected 1.4 million voter signatures across the state of Florida, surpassing the threshold needed to get on the ballot. As a result of the successful petition drive, Florida voters will decide the future of abortion rights in the state. The abortion referendum, known as Amendment 4, would enshrine abortion right up to 24 weeks in the state constitution. Organizers across the state are working to build support for Amendment 4, which will require 60% of voters support in order to pass. In addition to waging the fight for Amendment 4, local abortion rights organizations like Pensacola Abortion Rights Task Force are also working to educate people about remaining options for abortion access, including the Plan C, quote, Plan C, end quote, abortion pills, which can be self-administered and managed. Republicans break ranks over popular abortion bans. There's a little picture here, people protesting. The battle for abortion rights is unfolding at the state level all across the country. Arizonans are feeling relief as promising developments unfold. On May 1st, Governor Katie Hobbs signed a bill repealing the 1864 near-total ban on abortions after 2 Republican legislators broke ranks to repeal the law that the state Supreme Court had allowed to go into effect after the repeal of Roe v. Wade. With the repeal of this antiquated law, Arizona should go back to the 15-week ban that was instituted in 2022. However, the repeal of the 1864 law will not go into effect until 90 days after the adjournment of the state legislature, which could be as late as October or November. As a result, the 1864 ban technically began being enforced in late June. Attorney General Chris Mays has accessed the highest court to block enforcement until late July, and advocates are actively looking for other ways to delay enforcement even further. At the same time, Arizonans are feeling quite optimistic about the Arizona for Abortion Access ballot measure campaign, which proposes to make it a fundamental right to access abortion care up to fetal viability, 24 weeks of pregnancy. On April 2nd, the Arizona for Abortion Access ballot initiative announced that they had already received 506,892 petition signatures, surpassing the threshold of 122,000 signatures, a full 3 months before the deadline to submit to the Secretary of State. If approved in November, the ballot measures will supersede both the 1864 near-total ban and the 15-week ban. On May 4th, students and community members gathered at the University of Arizona in Tucson for a, quote, rally for Roe, end quote. Speakers emphasized that they had had enough of Democrats and Republicans using working people's bodily autonomy and life chances as a bargaining chip for the political careers. Attendees expressed that they are hopeful about the ballot measure prospects, but angry to be facing near total abortion bans in uncertain timelines, knowing abortion access could have been codified long ago if elected officials truly represented the interest of the working class. Why did some Republicans break ranks with their anti-abortion colleagues? It's not that Republicans have had a change of heart, but rather that their political calculations have changed. Arizona is expected to be an important battleground state in 2024 elections, and Republicans are concerned about the role these anti-abortion policies might play in the outcome. These extreme abortion bans are deeply unpopular and have the potential to impact election outcomes on their own. That even some Arizona Republicans are trying to distance themselves from the attack on reproduction rights reflects the popular support for abortion rights across all lines of division, including political parties. It also reflects the potential of the growing grassroots movement for abortion rights taking place across the country. This growing movement has become a factor in the political considerations of politicians across the state of Arizona. The people will decide. Ultimately, it will be neither the Democrats nor the Republicans that defend our bodily autonomy, our health care, or our basic rights to an abortion. It has always been the mass movements of working people which has won our rights and will be no different this time. As long as these outrageous attacks on abortion rights continue, people across the U.S. will continue to join the fight to defend and advance those rights. This was by Liberation News staff in Tucson, Arizona, contributed to this article. All right. First, I have allergies, so give me a second, and I'll be right back. All right, hopefully that's it for allergies for today. All right, so my personal opinions on this right here. First thing that comes to my mind is what they mentioned about how neither party actually fights for the American people. There's studies that show that over 60 or 70% of Americans support universal health care or some form of it, but it's not the law of the land yet. Most Americans support living wages, $15 an hour, but most southern states don't have it yet. Most Americans do support freedom to choose when it comes to abortion rights. Yet it's not the law of the land yet, but it was a carrot that the Democrats held out to liberals for a few decades now, but they never codify it, right? So what does this tell us about our laws, about our political system, about our capitalist economy system, that it works for the 1%, and it works only for the motivation of profit, right? Same with our politicians. If they're bought by a system where everything is commodified, even your votes practically, by the way our politicians are invested in, lobbied, then you can't really have a democracy in a system where the richest people buy out everything. That's not democracy. When it comes to why they want to ban abortion, the whole straw man that they're doing it to support conservative rights is nonsense. They do it as a form of control to control the people, as a form to create more labor. I know it sounds crazy, but yes, blocking abortion rights gives our government the opportunity to have people be forced to procreate more, to keep lifting up the population, and keep creating workers as well as consumers. This is another reason why the immigration system will never be shut down or properly fixed. Why, no matter how much conservative politicians tell you that they can put a giant wall up, it's not going to happen, because in a capitalist system, they need immigrants to come in, whether legal or illegal, to do the jobs that nobody else wants to do, whether it's cleaning houses or picking carrots or picking strawberries, right? So when you get further into the rabbit hole and start studying these things, start studying the history, you start seeing that history doesn't repeat itself, but it sure does rhyme, and it's exactly what's happening again. Don't forget, it was people like Ronald Reagan that gave us amnesty in America, not Democrats. You know, It was Reagan who gave immigrants a way to become citizens, residents, or citizens. In regards to the moral views on abortion rights, I am nobody to judge, especially because I'm not even a woman, but I can have my opinion that they should have the right to decide what is best for their body, because it is their body, right? And unfortunately, what happens is when you make something illegal, people find a way to do it too, whether it's through safe means or dangerous means. So I'd rather women that want to do this a safe way. There's also other things like health, medical complications, kids having kids, and none of that is healthy. There's medical, mental, physical, all kinds of complications and reasons for women to not want to go through with it. And I not only think it should be totally codified and legal, but it should be fully funded, just like universal health care. All right. These are my thoughts on it. It's crazy how even in red states, Republicans are even turning their backs on pro-life issues. Because even a red state like Florida pays $15 an hour, even though it's a conservative state. Weird. That's definitely living wage is a working class issue, but they make it look like it's a liberal state issue. Like if you raise the wages, everything else is going to go up. Everything goes up anyways. So these are my views on this issue. Let's see here. I have not much else to say on it, so I'm going to move along to the next article. I'm trying to think what else I might be able to say on this. Yeah, Arizona and Florida. I think it's good that they make articles like this and they show that this needs to be seen by people. I wish more people in Florida and Arizona would take in more independent news that actually cares about the working class and not people like Ben Shapiro that totally lies to you all the time. I want to say lie, but misrepresents things probably. So that's my thought on that. Hopefully this article gets across to people down there. Let's see here. Next article. Students protesting again. Every week, students protesting. Oh my goodness, they're protesting for human rights again. Like it's a bad thing. It's not. How dare these students grow moral conscience. All right. Title of the article: No more war profiteers on campus. Student movements challenge university ties to war and genocide then and now. By Nishad Gathaskar, May 6. Photo: The scientists against genocide encampment at MIT. Credit liberation photo. Nishad Gathaskar is a PhD student at MIT. Yeah. And he wrote this article. As Gaza solidarity encampments sweep the country demanding divestment from Israel and corporations that profit from Israel occupation, the students' movement is drawing attention to their universities' active roles in supporting war and genocide. In fact, academic institutions are hubs of fundamental research and development that are used in military technology and serve as pipelines into the military and defense industry by educating and training their future leaders. The term, quote, military industrial complex, end quote, MIC, often evokes images of powerful defense contractors partnering with the U.S. military to build fighter jets, missiles, and tanks. But this term often overlooks the crucial roles of universities. But our understanding of the MIC is incomplete without recognizing that role academia plays in this ecosystem. The promise of academia for many is an intellectual freedom and the independent pursuit of knowledge. And many young minds are drawn to academic institutions to take up scientific and technological endeavors to help build a brighter future for society, whether it's developing renewable energy to combat the climate crisis, pioneering breakthroughs in medicine to fight disease, or developing AI technologies that improve the lives of working people. Many researchers are driven by a shared vision of progress. But behind the idealistic facade is a stark reality. Today, academic institutions have become increasingly controlled by corporate and military interests. Instead of intellectual freedom, the research we pursue is defined by those that have the resources to fund it. And as a result, instead of the pure pursuit of knowledge for a brighter future, we do science and technology for war, imperialism, profit, and exploitation. Academia's entanglement in U.S. imperialism. The entanglement of academia with the MIC is deep and stretches back decades, but certain movements have shed light on this relationship. In 1942, as the United States mobilized for World War II, it started the Manhattan Project. With millions of dollars of U.S. military money, the project enlisted top physicists, engineers, and mathematicians from institutions across the country and deployed them to develop a nuclear weapon. Despite numerous warnings from these same scientists about the effects of these weapons, as well as uncertainty around whether dropping the bombs was actually necessary to force a Japanese surrender, President Truman dropped 2 bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, killing over 200,000 Japanese civilians. The Manhattan Project serves as a sobering reminder of how academic research can be weaponized for imperialism with devastating consequences. The legacy of World War II era reverberated into the Cold War era, where the arms race and the space race against the Soviet Union were fueled by university research. Academic institutions became partners in the pursuit of military and technological supremacy. There was a dramatic expansion of government-funded science and technology research with billions of dollars of funding flowing into academic research through DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, the Department of Defense, the Office of Naval Research, and the National Security Agency. Research agendas were shaped and manipulated by the demand of national security, and resources were diverted away from civilian-oriented research towards military objectives. The imperialist ruling class was strengthening its grip on academic research. No war profiteers on campus. But students saw the complicity of their universities clearly and rose up to fight back. By 1968, the United States was heavily involved in an escalating and increasing gruesome war on the people of Vietnam. Students were at the forefront of the anti-war movement, which was drawing connections between these academic institutions and imperialism against a nearly 30-year-long national liberation struggle. Students on campuses around the country protested university research on chemical weapons like Agent Orange and napalm. They demanded, quote, no war profiteers on campus, end quote. In May 1970, an estimated 4 million young people joined protests that shut down classes at 900 colleges, universities, and high schools around the country. These actions directly threatened the power of corporations, the MIC, the ruling class, perhaps even the capitalist state itself. The ruling class responded with violent repression. On May 4th, during a rally opposing expanding involvement of the Vietnam War into Cambodia at Kent State University, the Ohio National Guard was sent onto campus, firing on protesters and killing 4 students and wounding 9 others. This tragedy came to be known as the Kent State Massacre. The killings triggered outrage on campuses across the country, ultimately growing the strength of the student movement. The echoes of these past struggles resonate into the present day, where a new generation of students have taken up struggle against universities' ties to war and the defense industry, drawing inspiration from the movements against the Vietnam War and apartheid in South Africa. Thousands of students across the country are demanding that the universities end their complicity with Israel's genocide of the Palestinian people and divest from Israeli-linked corporations. Students have set up encampments on their campuses to make it clear to universities that they will not back down until their demands are met. At MIT, students organizers have set up Scientists Against Genocide encampment and are demanding that the university cut all research with their Israeli military. Daniel Chen, a graduate worker and organizer with the encampment, explained, quote, At MIT, students have set up and maintained an encampment for almost 2 weeks to protest the school's direct research with ties with the Israeli military and complicity in the ongoing genocide, end quote. Quote, there are projects funded by the Israeli Ministry of Defense to make autonomous drone swarms, for example, which have clear military applications to what's happening in occupied Palestine, end quote. Shen continued, quote, we need these funding ties and research collaborations to end, and the MIT community and broader Cambridge community have been continually showing up to the encampment in support of this demand, end quote. Across the country, students are making similar demands to their institutions to end their complicity in the genocide in Gaza. Free Palestine, from the river to the sea. Meanwhile, university administrators, police, and politicians are working together to repress the movement, often violently, as police raids on UCLA, City College of New York, and Columbia encampments have shown. In spite of these attacks, the students remain steadfast in their commitment. The student movement for Palestine is a testament to the power of collective action and the unwavering dedication to the Palestinian liberation struggle. This courage and resilience is an inspiration to the broader movement. Ultimately, it is through the collective power of the international working class movement for Palestine that is growing and rising by the day that we will force an end to the U.S.-Israeli genocide and free Palestine from the river to the sea. All right, so I liked how this, we've talked about this so many times because this is something that needs to be covered on a weekly basis, if not daily. But yeah, this echoes a lot what we said earlier, where history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes. And the reason students are protesting now the way students protested back in Vietnam is because we still have capitalism. And that is the crux of it. That is the main issue. That as long as we still have capitalism that rewards the most ghoulish, this is always going to happen. If we still have capitalism 50 years from now, this will always be happening again. There will always be students protesting. Why? Because people don't want to accept the fact that this is a ghoulish system that rewards the worst among us, and that is always the way it's going to be. It's just, you can see it. You see it through billionaires. You can see it through like the decisions that are going on right now. The world, major Western empires supporting Netanyahu, still funding that kind of war. Anybody with any common sense that knew what was happening decades ago would have ended this. But no, they kept it up, right? And then they see October 7th and they still excuse it, calling people anti-Semites for being anti-Zionist, which being anti-Zionist pretty much just means you're anti-colonialist and you're anti-fascist. I don't care what anybody wants to say. If you want to think that I'm anti-Semite because I think that Zionists are some sort of fascist, well, then you think whatever you want. But this is the fact. Zionists are blowing up women and children in their homes while they're sleeping because we want to occupy the land and they want to continue to occupy and dominate that whole area for real estate, which is ridiculous. It's absurd, it's disgusting, and it's deranged. That is my most common sense thought on this. Nobody should be supporting this. There's no ifs or buts about it. I'm not going to be apologetic about it. I'm not the type of person that's going to be like, yeah, I condemn Hamas. No, I don't condemn Hamas. Hamas is a reactionary product that Israel has created, right? So if I condemn anybody is the colonial state of Israel that should not be there, period. What that region needs is a one-state solution without the Zionist intent, so that the people in the area can have an actual democratic Palestine and not the apartheid that they have now. Cool. Let's see if there's anything else at the moment. Everything looks good. All right. Moving on. All right. So that was no war profiteers on campus. Oh, quite the number of articles this day. It's been a busy week at Liberation News, which is awesome. Keeps me busy. This is how I get all my reading in these Sundays. All right. The economy needs a radical change. Let me read that again. The economy needs radical change. All right, by Eugene Purrier, May 8th, 2024. The photo is of UPS workers at a July 2023 practice picket in New York City. Credit Wyatt Sowers. I think that's how you say his name. One of those says, for a just contract. All right, and reading the article. There is a disconnect between, quote, economic indicators, end quote, and how economy is actually affecting workers. In a system based on labor exploitation, a, quote, good, end quote, economy does not automatically mean better conditions for workers in either an absolute or relative sense. Major economic statistics measure stability, not quality of life. This creates a disconnect between how the economy is perceived, rooted in class interests. The mainstream political debate asks questions that can only be answered in a relative sense. The question, quote, is the economy good, end quote, can only be answered by asking for whom, relative to what, and with what goal in mind. For communists, the answers are for the working class, relative to the wealthy, to the wealth they produce, and with the goal of maximizing their control over that production. In that regard, the state of the economy is certainly not good. According to estimates from the Census Bureau, in March 2024, 21% of the labor force, over 35.6 million people, found it, quote, very difficult, end quote, to make ends meet week to week. Nearly 144 million people, 85% of all workers, were having at least, quote, a little, end quote, difficult covering their expenses week to week. At least 22.7 million people sometimes don't have enough to eat every week, and 53 million felt depressed, quote, at least several days, end quote, in the past 2 weeks. 65% of those making 50 to 100,000 report living paycheck to paycheck, and this is the case for 75% of those making less than $50,000. A family in the United States earns, on average, roughly $71,000 per year, but a recent Gallup poll found that a family needs at least $85,000 annually to get by. In a recent poll, only 15% of those making under $50,000 a year said they felt the economy was, quote, getting better, end quote, and just 12% of those said their personal finances were, quote, better off, end quote, than they were a year ago. 25% and 16% of those making between $500,000 and $100,000 said the same, respectively. In terms of both reality and perception, then a clear majority of workers feel that the economy is, at best, not improving, with significant percentages reporting that it is getting worse. The challenge facing the working class require that we articulate a different paradigm to shift the balance of power in the economy in order to address the actual interest of the working class, not the profit motives of the ruling class, around which the entire economic discussion revolves at present. Downward trends. Relentless focus on profit is core to capitalism. This obsession with profit is the system's motor engine. Over the past several decades, however, profitability has been in secular decline. Internal rate of capital percentages. So there's a chart here showing from 6 to 14 being, let's see, from 1950 to 2019. I'm not going to really go over this graph too much, but it shows the golden age, profitable crisis, neoliberal crisis, and the long depression. Cool. So there's another graph here, the U.S. rate of profit, EPWT, and non-financial rate by Basu Wasner in percentages. And this is from the same years, 1916 to 2018, which shows profit back in 1960 percentages were around 17%, now down to about less than 12%. Okay, this trend reduces the desire to invest, as each dollar invested doesn't go as far as it used to. Currently, quote, annual global investments is now less than that needed to replace worn out fixed assets, end quote. All right, so there's another graph here, long-term decline in the capex and depreciation. So these are economic charts. These are most boring and hard to understand for most people. But what you can read off of them is that since 1990, 1980 to about 2021, the economy profits and returns on investment have lowered from, let's say, a point from 2 to about less than 1.0. Okay. So we'll move on here. Capitalists have sought to address this through policies known as, quote, neoliberalism, end quote, specifically expanding production in the developing world, globalization, attacks on public spending, and progressive taxation, austerity, and a massive expansion of U.S. military power to subdue those who refuse to comply with the imperial agenda. None of this has arrested the downward trends. Increasingly, the need for transition and economic approaches collides with elite self-interest, especially profitability can only be increased by the exact policies that have left workers unsatisfied with the economic status quo. What does that mean in translation? That means more of the same that oppresses workers more. Socialism is a future. Build it now. Okay. There are certain amounts of resources, both human and material, on Earth. There are also a certain amount of needs and, quote, wants, end quote. Under socialism, the mobilization of resources serves to secure the basic needs of society, first and foremost, food, clothing, shelter, healthcare, education, and access to information. Socialism assures no one has to fear being destitute, left hungry, or on the street. Left hungry on the street. The various lines of industry would, in the first instance, be centered on these foundational tasks. These things can't just happen randomly, and many are interconnected. To meet the basic needs, there needs to be research into how to mobilize the required resources and also adjudicate any potential conflicts. Further, there has to be a process to manage beyond the basics of what we need to mobilize resources for the things we want. This is socialism, uniting the, quote, commanding heights, end quote, of the economy with new political rules and instruments to facilitate the rational use of our human and material resources. A socialist economy will be managed by democratic bodies that can set the broad, quote, national priorities, end quote, for resources mobilization and deployment. These will include entities that specifically represent women and nationally oppressed communities. Structures representing workers on the job will integrate their input into the management of enterprises, ensuring workers' control of investments, production, and distribution. Society is already partially structured for socialist transformation. The, quote, top 1% of companies by sales account for 80% of revenues, end quote. For 48% of all employees in the United States work at firms of over 100 employees, with just over one-fifth working in firms with more than 500 employees. Take, for example, the 100 largest U.S. companies. And now he lists them here. I guess I'll read through them. Walmart, Amazon, Costco, Kroger, Home Depot, Target, Lowe's, Albertsons, Best Buy, TJX, Public, GE, Boeing, DuPont, Johnson & Johnson, Procter & Gamble, Caterpillar, Lockheed Martin, Honeywell International, Deere, Nike, General Dynamics, 3M, Pepsi, ADM, Tyson, CHS, Coke, Exxon, Chevron, Phillips 66, Valero Energy, Marathon ETP, World Fuel Services, ConocoPhillips, Enterprise Product Partners, Exelon, Plains, GP, General Motors, Ford, Apple, Alphabet, Microsoft, Dell, IBM, Intel, United Technology, Cisco, HP, Meta, Cisco, Oracle, Tech Data, Berkshire Hathaway, United Health, Anthem, Humana, Cigna, McKesson, Amerisource, Virgin, CVS Health, Cardinal Health, Walgreens, Boots Alliance, Centene, HCA Healthcare, AT&T, Verizon, Comcast, Charter Communications, JP Morgan, Fannie Mae, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, Citigroup, Freddie Mac, Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, American Express, TIAA, Capital One, Pfizer, Merck, AbbVie, State Farm, MetLife, Prudential, AIG, New York Life Insurance, Nationwide, Liberty Mutual, Allstate, Mass Mutual, Progressive, UPS, FedEx, Delta, American Airlines, United Continental Holdings, Walt Disney. If workers control just these companies, 0.007% of all business, excluding the very smallest, they would be in control of the key levers of investment, production, and distribution. Practically, the biggest obstacle then to a socialist transformation is a relatively small group of capitalists who control the economy. From here to there. If we want to get from here to there, the most important task is for workers to build a political alternative around the need for a radical change in the economy. While many workers are dissatisfied, often majorly, with the status quo, confusion about what to do is still the main factor. Tens of millions of our fellow workers are set to vote for one of the two major parties that clearly have no answer to the problems of workers. Tens of millions of others will stay at home because they have no hope that the election can bring change. Even among many who know big change is needed, what to do and to accomplish it remain elusive. It's crucial to have a way to reorient the conversation in a way that dramatizes the inadequacies of capitalism in a way that speaks directly to how they can be overcome. This is why the PSL has raised the slogan of, quote, nationalize the Fortune 100, end quote, in our Vote Socialist 2024 election campaign, not because that is analogous to socialism per se, but because it speaks to the U-turn we need in the direction of the economy. We need to show how much is possible with more democratic central planning and how little can be done as long as, quote, the economy, end quote, is just a collection of individual monopolies all focused only on profit. The fact that such an emergency crash program would likely be legally unattainable in the United States, despite being desperately needed, speaks to the fact that capitalism can't be reformed, at least not enough to make the changes workers need to live with dignity. This reality reaffirms that the biggest obstacle standing in workers' way is the capitalist state, quote, the government, end quote. Only by uprooting it, by making a revolution, can we chart a new course for ourselves and generations to come. It's funny because he's saying what I was saying in the last few articles about how the biggest issue is always capitalism uh, and rewarding the most ghoulish, which is what that kind of system does, which is why we see so many horrible things happen in our name. Instead of spending billions here, spending resources here to fix our infrastructure, to give kids better schools, to give people better education, better healthcare, better housing, we see those billions go across for funding war. And then they tell us here that we just have to work harder. It's ridiculous. This is not a humane way for socialism, for our society to act. We need a better system. We need a stronger socialist economy and government. I'm not going to say much else to that because he pretty much said it all here. Eugene is very detailed. I love when he drops a few of these articles. He does every once in a while, and he does a great job of explaining in detail what can be done to change things, and gives excellent examples here of all the companies, the Fortune 100 companies, and how the system is already ready for a transition. We just need the working class people to unite, stop being divided under party politics, start uniting under the working class, so that everyone can have a fair share. Because there's no reason there should be people starving when there's billionaires in giant mansions, in giant yachts, swimming in their giant pools all by themselves. It's ridiculous. It's really just another Gilded Age. It's ridiculous. So we shouldn't we shouldn't even allow or think of allowing this kind of wealth disparity to go on. It's gone way beyond what it should, only because we are so easily numbed with televisions and cell phones and apps and YouTube, when we should be uniting as the working class. Not because we can do better, but because we can do better for people that need it. I for sure can't complain about my life. Everything's really well, but I understand and I empathize with people that are not doing well, because I've been there. And I don't think anybody should be there. Cool. All right. So that was that one. Let's see here. So May 9th. House Committee hearing on anti-Semitism takes an aim at public school educators by Jasper Saw, May 9th. I've been hearing about this all week now. All right, let's get into this. The photo is David Banks, Chancellor of New York City Public Schools, testifies before the House Committee on Education and Workforce. Credit the House Committee on Education and Workforce, YouTube. As university administrators, police forces, and right-wing mobs brutalize and threaten students for standing with Palestine, Congress is continuing to call educational officials from across the country to testify about the, quote, crisis of anti-Semitism, end quote, on campuses. It is clear how these committee, quote, investigations, end quote, are designed to discipline pro-Palestine students and force compliance with Zionism from educational officials. It is not just the presidents of elite colleges and universities like Columbia, Harvard, MIT, University of Pennsylvania, and George Washington University facing congressional scrutiny. On May 8th, administrators from Berkeley, Unified, New York City, and Montgomery County, Maryland, school districts were called before a subcommittee on the House Committee on Education and Workforce hearing to face allegations of, quote, pervasive, end quote, anti-Semitism in schools. These three school districts are some of the largest and most diverse public school districts in the country, collectively responsible for the education of hundreds of thousands of students. The Committee of Education and Workforce statement stated their purpose clearly. Quote, anti-Semitic incidents have exploded in K-12 schools following Hamas' horrific October 7th attack. Jewish teachers, students, and faculty have been denied a safe learning environment and forced to contend with anti-Semitic agitators due to its district leaders in action, end quote. The struggles in schools. The fabricated panic around, quote, anti-Semitism, end quote, in K-12 education parallels the development of this narrative as it relates to college campuses. The narrative goes like this. Since October 7th, quote, anti-Semitic, end quote, incidents have exploded, making Jewish students and teachers feel unsafe at school. These, quote, incidents, end quote, include, as reported by Zionist organizations like the Anti-Defamation League, the Jewish Community Relations Council, the Zionist Organization of America, and the International Holocaust Remembrance Association, any kind of pro-Palestine speech or imagery. In some cases that were deemed, quote, anti-Semitic, end quote, incidents included such benign things as wearing watermelon-themed jewelry or a hijab. Let me read that again. In some cases, what were deemed anti-Semitic incidents included such benign things as wearing watermelon-themed jewelry or a hijab. These Zionist groups are often framed as, quote, community organizations, end quote, in relation to the school district at hand. With immense funding and dozens of paid staff, these organizations are deeply intertwined with curriculum development and other important internal workings of these school districts through their lobbying and influence apparatuses. Berkeley, New York City, and Montgomery County in Maryland are not only among the most populous and racially diverse school districts in the country, but they are also districts with some of the highest class disparities in the country. Despite being one of the wealthiest cities in the world, over 100,000 of New York public school students, about 10% of all public students enrolled in New York City, are homeless or housing insecure. Montgomery Public Schools serves both poor, working class, largely immigrant students in some of the most diverse zip codes in the United States, as well as students in Bethesda and Potomac, which are among the wealthiest bastions of ruling class suburbia. It is not a coincidence that Congress has targeted these three districts, with potential to call in others like the District of Columbia Public Schools, where the reproduction of ruling class ideology is particularly essential. Anti-Palestinian racism and Islamophobia is running rampant. Despite the full court press in Congress and the media to make it seem like, quote, anti-Semitism, end quote, is raging, educators and students who are speaking out for Palestine are the ones being disciplined, harassed, and threatened. With regard to Montgomery County Public Schools in particular, 4 middle school teachers have been placed on leave for speaking in solidarity with Palestine. In some cases, on personal social media, Arab and Muslim students have been specifically targeted. Math teacher Hajur El-Hagan was placed on administrative leave for mentioning Palestine in her email signature. Even after complying with administrations and removing the slogan when asked, a Muslim student at Northwood High School in Montgomery County testified to the Board of Education last week that at her school, she had witnessed staff members recording and intimidating student participating in an educational event called, quote, Hijab Day, end quote, confronting and harassing students wearing clothing with anti-Zionist messaging, tearing down Muslim Student Association posters from school boards, as well as other instances of stalking and harassment, including lying about MSA activities and comparing them to the KKK. However, it is pro-Palestinian teachers being placed on leave, censured, and threatened with termination. In one part of the student's testimony, she described a peer saying about their Muslim classmates at the school, quote, I hope they burn in hell and get buried with the dead Palestinians, end quote. Other students who have organized walkouts, teach-ins, or other admirable solidarity events during this school year have been similarly harassed, silenced, and targeted. These examples are just the tip of the iceberg and goes much deeper than incidents since October 7th. The idea that any of this is born from a sincere concern of the safety of Jewish people is manifestly untrue. At the beginning of the hearing, Reb Suzanne Bonamici asked the committee to condemn right-wing anti-Semitism from the likes of Nick Fuentes and the 2017 Charlottesville, quote, Unite the Right, end quote, rally where fascists chanted, quote, Jews will not replace us, end quote, while played for cheap partisan points against obviously insincere Republican representatives, that a single member of the committee condemned these truly vile acts of anti-Semitism from the far right. The role of Congress. Before dawn on the same day as these hearings, D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser and D.C. Metropolitan Police Chief Pamela Smith's scheduled hearing in front of the House Oversight Committee was canceled after the city finally conceded to the demands of the George Washington University President Ellen Granberg to brutally raid and disperse the Solidarity encampment at the university's yard, renamed, quote, Shuhada Martyrs Square, end quote, by the students in honor of those Palestinians killed in Israel's ongoing genocide. House Oversight Committee Chairman Rep. James Comer makes the dynamic clear in his statement. Quote, I am pleased that the potential oversight hearing led to swift action by Mayor Bowser and MPD Chief Smith, end quote. Rep. Brandon Williams of New York grilled David Banks, the Chancellor of New York City Public Schools, specifically on the lack of terminations and quite literally scoffing and laughing out loud at Banks' mere response that, quote, all educators have due process rights, end quote, and can't be fired arbitrarily before an investigation is completed. During the congressional hearing, the representative from Berkeley Unified was grilled on the relationship between the school district and the Liberated Ethnic Studies Consortium, a progressive curriculum development organization built on the legacy of the movement in California to create more diverse curricula at all levels. This demonstrates precisely the purpose of these hearings. Committee Chairman Bean grilled every school district representative on just how many teachers they've fired, how many students they've suspended or expelled, explicitly to make the point that these actions must be taken. These hearings, along with other attacks on public education, whether in the form of union busting or so-called, quote, critical race theory, end quote, gender ideology, end quote, or any other form of, quote, parents' rights, end quote, movements, must be seen as part of a full frontal assault on public education, academic freedom, and the First Amendment more broadly. Students, however, are not backing down. High schoolers have organized walkouts, teach-ins, open letters, testified in front of school boards, filed curricula and discrimination complaints, and countless other actions over the last months. Recently, students in Boston walked out of class to join the Gospel Solidarity encampment at MIT. Congressional hearings, suspensions, censorships, and the whole suite of state repression have not broken the burgeoning revolutionary spirit among the youth. And it is not that they are brainwashed by TikTok, like this same Congress would have you believe. It is that the youth see this genocide for what it is. Base students. Once again, I would like to thank and commend all these students around the world, from high school to college, that are standing up for what is morally correct, what is clear, and they are at such a young age not letting the higher powers in Congress or the deep state or the state in general or corporations, not letting all these powers gaslight them and brainwash them. It is obvious what's going on in Gaza. It is obvious what's going on to the Palestinians. It is obvious that it's been going on for 75 years. And it is obvious that it's a colonial project. And Zionism is quite a fascist project. So thank you to all these students for standing up. When there is rallies in my area, when there's protest, I definitely participate. And I look forward to seeing you all out there. And if you don't support the Free Palestine movement, then you are complicit and you need to grow conscious, or you are morally bankrupt. And that is the truth. That is the honest truth. Very well. A great article here. Let's go back to this page. All looks good. I can keep reading. I mean, I don't really have much else to say about that article. It literally is the elites, the oligarch, just pulling strings. And it just goes to show most decent, honest, real Jews do not support the occupation of Palestine. They are with the students. Most Jews are colonialist, that are Zionists. If you notice, they don't even look like Jews. They're just typical European land grabbers. And that's the honest truth. So do what you want with that comment. Do what you will with that comment. This is the truth. And this is unequivocal. Do the research. Most Jews that are in Israel don't even look Jewish. They look European. Yeah, I'm not going to be gaslit. Most people are not going to be gaslit at this point. Most people that are defending Zionism are doing it because of their fear for their religion, or because it benefits them in some way, or they're just ghoulishly ignorant, and that's that. All right, so here we go. 9 o'clock already. Ooh. A lot of reading today. Rural union workers win big in Minnesota. Liberation staff, May 10th, 2024. 7-minute read. All right. Well, it is what it is. Let's see. A unit of, you know what? Let me check my audio to make sure it's good. Audio check, 1, 2. All right, all is good. Do I look tired? I might be a little tired. I was out running around today on the lawn. All right. Again, rural union workers win big in Minnesota. A unit of 78 Paraprofessionals in rural Cold Springs, Minnesota ratified their contract after their months-long battle with school administrators. The union has emerged in an impressive organizing campaign to win one of the largest package increases for paraprofessionals in the area. These wins include a 30% increase in employer contributions to healthcare, an 8 to 9% wage increase over 2 years, settlement payout on a multi-member grievances, and significant increases in longevity wage differentials. At a time when labor victories are resounding across the Twin Cities, this unit in Cold Springs, Minnesota, proves that rural workers are not to be underestimated in their capacity to organize and win. Paraprofessionals cited a variety of reasons for entering into the fight, with some of the largest issues being low pay and better staffing conditions. In 2023, the average paraprofessional in a school district made less than $22,000 a year. Many of the paraprofessionals worked multiple jobs in order to make ends meet at home. Workers also reported an alarming increase in neck injuries from caring for younger children, as well as understaffing during and after the height of the COVID-19 pandemics. Beyond workplace issues, paraprofessionals also reported feeling that there was a lack of appreciation for their work and that they were often treated as expendable and unimportant. One para reported that her building manager claimed, quote, "It doesn't matter if you, the paraprofessional, go on strike. We have it covered," end quote. School board members themselves made comments on publicly broadcasted meetings saying that the paraprofessional's work was a part-time job, end quote, and quote, not enough to raise a family on, which is a choice, end quote. These school board members even doubled down, saying that compared to paras, they, quote, work in the real world, end quote, and, quote, work all year, end quote. Let's be clear, paraprofessionals do not get into this line of work to make a lot of money. Paraprofessionals overwhelmingly report that their primary motivation for entering the field was wanting to care for children who were left behind by conventional classroom structures. However, a sizable number of paras were forced to work one or two extra jobs to make ends meet. Para work is socially reproductive. It not only helps children today, but also molds healthy and respectful relationships with children that they can carry forward into future interactions. One para said she hopes the kids she works with today will look back and say, quote, "Yes, she helped me, and now I know what to do with my children," end quote. They engage in the work because they understand that children are the key to our future every day. Paraprofessionals engage in some of the most important work for society, teaching children how to develop into caring and compassionate adults. When doing work like this, one job should be enough for these paraprofessionals to be able to raise their families. They should not have to work more shifts than the school day is over. This work is real work, even if school board members don't see it as such. For the paraprofessionals in Cold Springs, getting involved meant having a say in pushing the school board to do more than it had ever done before. One para reported that she became involved in the fight because, quote, "I believe we deserve a lot more than we get. I learned what the administration gets, and it's a lot more than we do," end quote. The paras had consistently received contracts that marginally improved their conditions for years, but they wanted the school district to take their demands seriously. The majority of paraprofessionals are women, and members of the school district characterize paraprofessionals as largely stay-at-home moms who didn't need wage increases. This kind of characterization is prevalent in work considered, quote, "women work," end quote, which largely consists of some form of caretaking or domestic labor. It begs the question of why people feel so comfortable saying that such work should be paid less or is less difficult than other work. A large part of the negotiations went beyond economics. This was about getting the school board to take the paras seriously and recognize the value of their work. In order to be taken seriously, the paras had to be militant in their organization. They went to their peers and struck up conversations about contract negotiations and began to pull their co-workers into attending open negotiations, organizing actions, and planning meetings. Over the course of negotiations, union memberships rose from under 80% to 100% by the time of ratification. Participation in planning was so high that the workers outside of the bargaining and contract action teams formed additional committees for logistics, escalation planning, and community outreach. While school board members attempted to make the quote union and end quote out to be a third party that was pushing Paris to escalate, the Paris organized their own actions and marched on the administrative office to protest better contract terms. After all, what is a union if not an organization of and for your coworkers? The Paris refused to fall for the school board's attempt to alienate them from their union representation. When the school board continued to drag their feet on coming back with new terms, the Paris took the next step. They filed to strike. This decision was not made lightly. The Paris understood that going on strike meant they would face uncertainty and difficulty. However, they were willing to undergo that temporary strife if it meant they could have long-term wins in their contract. Despite intimidation and demeaning comments, the Paris refused to break unity in their decision. When the Paris filed for strike, the school board understood that they were serious. A paraprofessional who had worked at the district for over 20 years said, quote, the administration realizes that we are willing to stick together now and that this is a big plus. For once, someone has finally stood up to the school board, end quote. Within 2 days, the school board acquiesced to the Paris demands and agreed to one of the best contracts the paraprofessionals had ever seen. By winning these contract terms, paras were able to keep health insurance affordable after the largest premium hike they had faced, raise starting wages to comparable levels throughout the region, and receive recognition for their dedication to their community. The increase in health insurance contributions was one of the largest increases in the unit's history. The wage increase was twice as large as typical wage increases for the unit, and the paras had been fighting for years for an increase in longevity wage differentials. The terms of this contract contained the realization of years' worth of hopes and dreams for the unit and provided them with not only financial gains, but an increase in the dignity and recognition they have at work. A victory like this in a rural part of Minnesota appends common misconceptions of about the political conscience of rural workers. Rural workers are often considered to be less pro-union than workers in urban centers. While national attention is often focused on labor battles in major cities and the coast, workers in rural areas are building up their own militant movements to be seen, heard, and compensated. In their small school districts, the paras recognized many of their community members when they were flyering, which made raising support for their contract fight markedly easier. When holding planning meetings, they patroned a local bar. The paraprofessionals used unique elements of small town life to their advantage to build up local support for their cause. One para reflecting on organizing in a rural area said, quote, in the smaller school districts, I think it's easier. You have a smaller group of people and we can all get together and plan stuff. It's easier for us to communicate with each other at work. It shows you it can be done, end quote. Cold Springs is not a liberal region. Residents vote overwhelmingly Republican, and yet when their parents began speaking out about their fight, community support was immense. Parents attended school board meetings to testify about the paraprofessionals had done for their children, incensed at the conditions the paras faced. This victory also drives home important truths about what organizing is really about. When this contract battle began a year ago, over a fifth of the paraprofessionals unit was organized, with even the majority of existing members not actively participating in the union. Stewards and other union members raised union membership to 100%, not by herding non-members around and telling them what to do, but by building a sense of empowerment through achievable asks and the protection of collective action. Organizing is not about the union telling people that they need to do something to win. After all, who is, quote, the union, end quote? The union is the workers and their co-workers. By carrying out various actions, the workers realized that the capacity to win already existed within them. They built up unity and discipline within their ranks so that when the district dared them to go on strike, they could call the district's bluff. This contract battle was a realization of power of the paraprofessionals, that their work was valuable and that the school district would not run without them. Above all, the paras said they entered into the fight for the kids. While they were out flyering the community, they ran into one of their students. He was out enjoying the day with his family. His face lit up, and so did theirs. The moment they saw the child, they had nothing but tenderness and care for him. They were genuinely interested in his day and excited to see him during the school week. There is a compassion that runs through their work that touches some core nerve that we all have deep down, the dream that the future will be better. The parents wanted large wins so they could meet their own needs and thus be able to better meet the needs of others. The parents won because they understood that they would never win big unless they were disciplined, united, and dedicated. As one paraprofessional said, quote, I think these women deserve to have some level of safety so that they're not always in survival mode, working a job that takes care of so many people, end quote. There is a strength in caring for and serving our most vulnerable, and it is exactly this strength that they were able to transform into power and finally victory. Based. This goes back to my other comments that I make. The usual. That the school budget, the state budget, they'll budget for things that totally benefit capitalism, right? Selling books, stuff like that. But they won't invest in the workers themselves. They have no issues investing all this state money, half of the state's budget, on militarizing the police. But when it comes to actually taking care of the people, no, they'd rather leave the people uneducated, unsupported, so they can become practically criminals and victims of the police, right? So just think about this. They had to strike to get paid what was a living wage for themselves, because otherwise it would have never been given to them, even though the money was there. Obviously, it was there to allocate to them. Otherwise, they would have never won the strike, right? So this is what capitalism does. It lets ghoulish people oppress you as much as possible until you push back. And it shouldn't be that way. They shouldn't be these people that can take advantage of people taking advantage of the most vulnerable, or people that just want to do a good job. Everyone should have a living wage. Even these people, they should have, I mean, if they were only making $20,000 for a part-time job, which is what, maybe 20 hours a week, maybe they should be making 25 to 30,000, like a living wage, you know? And yeah, they should have full benefits. They should have great benefits. Everyone should have universal health care. So when healthcare and health insurance becomes an issue to me, it's more like, why do we have health insurance? Such a waste of money. What a middleman. But this is how they keep people choked. You know, this is how they keep people oppressed, making them think that they don't deserve a living wage, making them think that they don't deserve great health care because they chose to have helpful careers that actually gave back to the community and helped people. No, instead the bankers and people that are totally useless make the billions of dollars. Totally ridiculous. Anyways, glad that they won. And it goes to show the working class movement is across party lines. You don't need to be a Republican or a Democrat. The sooner you drop this whole division of Republican, Democrats, conservative liberalism, the sooner you become a full-blown leftist, a socialist or communist, or a supporter of the working class, or a proletariat. Well, all you have to know is that the battle is always the working class against the elite. And you're either one or you're other, or you're a bootlicker. Cool. All right, let's see what else is going on here. All right. The school is a struggle. The struggle is a school. Yeet. Let me see. Did I read that one already? No. I'm going to read that now. 13 minutes? Jesus. They dropped some huge ones this week. I'm down. All right. The school is a struggle. The struggle is a school. Party of Socialism and Liberation. Party of Socialism and Liberation. May 12, 2024. 13 minutes. The photo is rally at Columbia University encampment. Let me get my... A preliminary summation after 3 weeks of campus encampments. Students at Columbia University, City College of New York, UCLA, and so many other schools have set a beautiful example of defiance this past week against one of the most extreme mobilizations of cops in recent memory. Although the students were pulled out of the encampments and school buildings they had been holding, they did so with their heads held high, maintaining the chants that have ricocheted across the world in the last 3 weeks. Quote, disclose, divest, we will not stop, we will not rest, end quote. The corporate media hacks rapidly took their place on every station to try and spin the scenes unfolding before the world's eyes with headlines designed to distract and divide. But all their smears and misinformation combined with will amount to nothing in the long run. As with the anti-war student occupation of the Vietnam era and then of the anti-apartheid struggle in the 1980s, those who seized the police on students, those who sicked the police on students will be condemned by history. The students who refuse to back down in the face of violence, suspension, and possible expulsion will be absolved by it. The next weeks and months will undoubtedly show that, no matter how intense this repression has been, the youth movement will continue to expand so long as genocide in Gaza does not end. The university encampments demanding divestment and solidarity with Gaza have already spread nationwide since Columbia was initiated 3 weeks ago. All PSL branches have mobilized to provide them support, and our student members are directly involved in others in over a dozen encampments and playing key roles in several. A significant number of our comrades are facing not just arrest, suspension, and expulsion, but also targeted police harassment, firings, and criminal charges, all because they've stood up to defend and expand the encampments as part of the global movement for Palestine. While it is too early to fully synthesize the experience of these last 3 weeks, and we are learning new tactical and strategic lessons every day, several key principles and patterns are already evident that we believe are important to share. As many campus encampments are now facing the end of the semester while staring down police attacks and administrative intimidation, it is important that no student activists give into defeatism or cynicism. Instead, we are taking stock on our lessons and pressing forward. The school has become a struggle, and the struggle has become our school. Ooh. From speaking every day with the comrades involved in dozens of student encampments, all of which have their own particularities and are in different phases, several universal lessons stand out for a pre-military summation. Oh, this is going to get good. All right. Number one, the student movement is a specific terrain of struggle. There are unique qualities of the university reality that are often conducive to the rapid setup of encampments, and there are unique campus politics around which all encampments take shape. This wave of encampments is not just because young people are more radical on average than the rest of the population. University students form dense social networks that live together and develop their shared identities, especially where large numbers live on or near campus. Less likely to have demanding jobs and families, undergraduate students in four-year schools tend to have more control over their own time. They have a greater sense of, quote, rights, end quote, to the university's common spaces around them and direct access to the building of institutional power. These particularities create significant tactical and psychological advantages. An act of repression against the students, especially if it is seen as unwarranted, tends to draw in more of the student body. Even where arrest can be effected, the students often live close to where they have camped out and are in constant proximity and communication with one another, making it fairly easy to return or regroup. For all these reasons and more, the encampment tactic can be replicated in similarly situated campuses nationwide. Even if it is not easily transferable to the working class as a whole, it can start with relatively small groups and draw in more students as struggles unfold. As the struggle unfolds. Number 2, no campus is an island and student, quote, exceptionalism, end quote, is a dead end. While every university has its own specificity that those outside of it should appreciate, drawing sharp lines between, quote, the students, end quote, and, quote, outside support, end quote, cuts off the alliances necessary to win. In the emotionally moving movements, when an encampment is set up in which you enjoy the feeling of defiance, freedom, and self-governance, it can appear that the students have all the power and the balance of forces on campus totally in their favor. After all, administration is a few people, the students are many, but this is an illusion. Behind the administration is not only an elaborate system of rules, laws, and property rights, but the whole ruling class, the corporate media, the police, and if need be, the National Guard. The immediate question becomes, who will stand behind the students? As soon as the administration begins to take action against the students, the necessity of outside mobilization and an integrated on-campus and off-campus strategy becomes apparent. This is why the ruling class media focuses heavily on creating a, quote, outside agitators, end quote, narrative to shift balance of forces in their favor. We reject this. In a relationship based on trust and camaraderie, those organizations on campus and outside of it are functioning as co-strategists in constant consultation and thinking always about how each action is rippling into the larger political movement or larger political moment. In the long run, the balance of forces at every university will be determined not just by the tactical reality of the encampment or building occupations, but by local, state, national, and international politics. Ultimately, expanding the movement into different sections of youth and workers and growing consciousness widely is what creates the momentum for new advances while broadening the defense of the encampment. See, for instance, the coming strike authorization vote of UC graduate students to protest the university's failure to protect employees from police abuse, or the unionized graduate student at Columbia and MIT who invoked protected labor picketing rights to help defend students. These are just small showings of how the organized working class has tremendous power that can widen the struggle. On the flip side, capitulations, disorganized retreats, and political blunders on campus also negatively impact the morale and the broader movement. We are all in this together. 3. Divestment will be a long-term struggle because it revolves around the politics of imperialism and the belly of the beast. It is not just about the rate of return on investments. If divestment were just about, quote, socially responsible, end quote, investing, that would be one thing. But because Israel serves a garrison state of U.S. imperialism, to win divestment requires accelerating larger contradictions against the ruling class and among the ruling class. We know that the Palestinian struggle for liberation will be based first and foremost on what happens in Palestine, and no amount of action from the imperialist center can substitute for that. Our role in the imperialist metropolis is to produce a political crisis for the ruling class that serves as a restraint on the funding and backing of the apartheid regime and its genocide. Divestment is one aspect of this. So long as the U.S. ruling class is on the political defensive, the movement can remain on the offensive, and vice versa. Divestment may be more achievable in the short term in certain schools and institutions that are less essential for the U.S.-Israeli relationship. This creates important momentum and precedence. Otherwise, other universities, which are central organs of the U.S. ruling class and imperialist administration, will be more challenging. For Harvard to divest from Israel, for instance, would be equivalent to a total break between the U.S. foreign policy establishment and Israel, and thus set the stage for the dismantling of the Zionist project as a whole. Its president was made to resign by ruling class pressure for not cracking down on students enough. Imagine the backlash by their class for divesting from Israel and accepting students' demands. Even if these elite schools do not immediately divest because they are violating the wishes of their student body and surrounding community, this exposes the hollowness of their leadership, diminishes their ideological hold, and puts these institutions on the defensive. Unlike in the case of apartheid South Africa, which by the 1980s already was seeing a split U.S. ruling class, at present the U.S. ruling class remains highly united behind the Zionist project. There are small cracks in this unity, but the U.S.-Israel relationship is so integrated that at the highest summits, that the U.S. ruling class would only throw Israel overboard as part of a world-shaking change in the relationship of forces. Students are starting to play their role in shaking the empire from within. A huge step forward. Huge. Number 4. The student encampment's main power is that they have produced a political crisis for the ruling class. The encampments are causing disruption to the schools of higher learning, but they are generally not stopping school entirely, which is more challenging in an era of remote classes and exam taking. Divestment is yet to see a massive success, but what could come soon. Yet the encampments are dominating headlines and now being met with massive police force. Why? What makes some tents so dangerous? Their power is that they symbolize and represent how the U.S. ruling class and Zionism has lost a whole generation, including as its most elite schools that it uses to produce cadres for the bourgeoisie. The encampments thus serve as visual proof of where the youth stand, indicting the ruling class and causing embarrassment of the Democratic Party in particular. Rather than an undercurrent of frustration, this reality is now visible and audible. The encampments are driving conversation nationwide and indicating that divestment from the apartheid project will become a major cause for years to come. Whether or not divestment is won in the short term, the youth have thrown down the gauntlet and declared what side of history they will be on. Given this, we have prioritized maintaining and defending the encampments, wherever this helps retain the mass character of the student movement, creates a base to return to, and extends the ruling class's political crisis. Sometimes an encampment cannot be preserved for a range of factors, and in these cases we seek other tactics that are equally impossible to ignore, and which retain the dynamic of mass participation in the struggle. Woo! I think I'm halfway done with this one. Number 5. Every encampment needs a political and practical strategy to defend itself and keep going, and this means contending against the state. It might, in fact, have been smarter for university administrations to leave encampments alone and hope they lose steam, but with few exceptions, that has not been the case. Every struggle under capitalism inevitably comes into conflict with capitalist law, and thus the forces of the state, for which the police are just the frontline soldiers, as well as the far right, any illusion about the police or the Democratic Party will be rapidly swept aside by the experience of police repression. It is through the experience of these conflicts that people rapidly develop genuine class consciousness and see the necessity for a whole new system. Security is ultimately a political and collective question, not an individual one. Individual tactics like covering one's face or using pseudonyms to avoid doxing, etc., may have operational value in certain circumstances, but an excessive focus on these measures can create a one-sided conception of security that breeds excessive caution or fear on the one hand, while providing a false sense of safety on the other. Yes, the struggle will produce consequences for some individuals, but the only real security we have against that is building a powerful enough movement that can push back against the ruling class and a strong enough network that can sustain individuals when repression and reprisals inevitably come. Some moments demand advances, and others require temporary retreats. That is part of the struggle. But to safeguard morale, we strive so that every advance has a plan to hold new territory, and every retreat can lead to an organized regroupment rather than a total dispersal. Maintaining the unity of an encampment is an important task that cannot be taken for granted. A shared student encampment does not make everyone ideologically homogeneous. They inevitably reflect all the contradictions of where students are starting from, but consciousness and political lines of demarcation can rapidly shift through the process of struggle. We have seen levels of consciousness grow quickly in the last 3 weeks. We have seen sentiments of sectarianism and distrust melt away based on close proximity in a shared struggle. And as participants develop a common vocabulary to struggle through problems that they then experience together, at the same time, all the contradictions of the left remained, and all the contradictions of society still find their way into the encampments, since they are made for real humans, not superheroes. Instead of sorting into rival camps and leaderships, it is generally best to keep one united camp that can confront the state and the administration. We do not need ideological unity to have tactical unity. Navigating all this requires channeling all the qualities of a revolutionary, a high level of political clarity and organization, consistency, patience, and sensitivity towards each other, audacity and creativity in the field of tactics, and much more. It requires comrades to consult with one another constantly, to compare notes and share information. The push and pull of a mass movement makes this harder, but also makes it all the more necessary. It requires putting forward one's views honestly, but also accepting the sentiment of the body. Encampments have remained more united when they develop decision making structures that engage all those who are involved. The notion that structurelessness and, quote, everyone doing their own thing, end quote, will produce more internal unity or prevent co-optations has been disproven at several campuses. To have neither leadership structures nor collective decision making creates the space for self declared leaders to impose themselves on everyone else. Number 7, beware of the administration's bureaucratizing tactics, toothless promises, secret negotiations, stalling, and hand-picking student leaders. Meeting across the table from one's enemy is a necessary part of all struggles. In wars, labor, fight, or student encampments, there is nothing in principle wrong with it, and all negotiations reflect the shifting balance of forces. But this negotiating room with students is largely the ruling class's terrain, and their hope is to sap students' energy and dynamism through Byzantine bureaucratic processes, or divide them with half measures that they dangle as, quote, concessions, end quote. But all that glitters is not gold. With all their money, they can easily throw around this or that scholarship for students in Gaza, or a new, quote, safe space, end quote, for Muslim students. It is all a pittance compared to the billions they're making on apartheid and by not divesting. It is a pittance compared to the headaches caused by the encampments. Anything that bogs down the struggle is a setback at a time when students' encampments have enormous moral power and political leverage. The question of how best to advance a mass radical anti-war movement is not identical to a conventional labor struggle. Students' core leverage is in maintaining the encampment itself as a space of mass movement outside of the administration's political control that has the capacity to grow and take further action. The continued radicalization of young people is itself a form of leverage. To make the encampment more, quote, manageable, and, quote, exclusive to student participation and so on, only undercuts this leverage. And once the encampment is gone, almost all of the students' leverage is gone too. We recommend that all negotiations be opened as a form of mass exposure of the administration. Otherwise, they create inordinate power for a small, generally unaccountable group of negotiators. In situations where encampments are simply unable to continue and their unraveling or total repression is likely, it is understandable why some would feel the pressure to accept some negotiated end. But even in those cases, there are only a few negotiated concessions short of divestment that would have any real political value for the next stage of struggle and which the administration can't wiggle out of. Anything that routes this struggle, while it is in a stage of popular mobilization into bureaucratized processes, non-binding agreements, and endless advisory committees plays into hands of the administration. Because endowments are integrated into highly complex investment portfolios managed by third parties, this gives universities additional opportunities to drag things out with legal technicalities. In the cases where the negotiated end is inevitable, the important thing is to not call a setback a victory, as some have erroneously done. It is stronger to go out with the integrity and principles of the students' movement intact. This creates a more solid foundation for the next wave of militant struggle and exposes the administration, the state, and the ruling class. This is the model set by Columbia and several other schools. Of course, even where errors are made or people succumb unnecessarily to the pressure of the administration, this is not the end of the struggle. Even bureaucratized processes can be utilized as targets and timelines for the next stage of student mobilization, a means to expose the administration's broken promises and hopefully rebuilding an even stronger movement. Conclusion: Palestine has won the narrative war. Its victory is inevitable. Two quotes from opposing sides of the barricades confirm the monumental impact of the mass movement in solidarity with Palestine and the students' movement in particular. Quote, "We salute the free American students and we assure them that victory on the awareness front is more important than victory on the military front because this is the only way to avoid war." End quote. Mohammed al-Bukaidi, Asar Allah Political Bureau. Quote, "Some think these things happening across college campuses are a sideshow. No, they are the show. If we lose the intellectual battle, we will not be able to deploy any army in the West ever." End quote. Alice Karp, CEO, Palantir. Strategists from both the imperialist and anti-imperialist camps recognize the movement in the United States as part of a larger narrative war, which sets the overall political environment in which the combatants operate, and thus the long-term trajectory of the struggle. But Bukaidi calls the, quote, awareness front, end quote. Karp calls the, quote, intellectual battle, end quote. Fidel Castro famously called it the, quote, battle of ideas, end quote. General David Petraeus, who devised U.S. counterinsurgency for the occupation of Iraq, recognized that the Pentagon's domination of all 5 domains of warfare, land, sea, air, cyber, and space, were useful if it could not were useless if it could not win the, quote, human domain, end quote. If the occupation could not win the hearts and minds of the Iraqi people, in the long run, the United States could not win, and it did not. All these terms describe the same thing, and in the case of Palestine's liberation struggle, the narrative war has already crossed its tipping point. Israel and the U.S. empire have lost. All of its imperialism tools, from military to media to culture, cannot overcome this political and psychological defeat, and it can't be reversed by a bloody Rafah invasion either. After 7 months of live-streamed genocide, nonstop protest and mobilization, disrupting of politicians wherever they go, and now dramatic student encampments, there is no going back in the consciousness of the world's people, and among young people in the United States in particular. And every day the war of the Palestinian people goes on, imperialism loses its ability to project power, not just in the Middle East, but to, quote, deploy any army, end quote, as Karp put it, quote, ever, end quote. Regardless of whether they repress the encampments or stall on an divestment, the long-term arc of history is evident. Israel and its backers from now on will be isolated. Whether the battle is short or long, Palestine's victory is inevitable. Based. Yeah. So, wow, that's a lot. My throat is parched. But what I get out of that is that America and Israel has lost the popular opinion. And a big part of it has to do with the higher class, higher learning students, like at Harvard and Columbia, have uh, have finally set off and ignited a tipping point, or gotten the momentum ball really rolling as to the consciousness of the world, of human consciousness here in regards to what's going on in Palestine. Uh, a lot of people were probably feeling gaslit if they didn't know about the issue until September 7th. These last 6 months, they have awoken to realize that they've been gaslit, uh, they've been fed lies, and that's why you're seeing the momentum shift towards the energy of the activists, because a lot of these people that were being gaslit, that were talking ignorantly practically, are now just staying quiet and uh, letting the activist lead the way, which is good because this shifts the opinions, right? People that were maybe silent before, or that were just going with the mainstream idea, are now reassessing their thoughts and accepting that they've been lied to. Uh, and it really awakens more class consciousness in regards to what else could people be getting lied to about? Could capitalism actually not be as good as people think? Just because somebody's doing well, does that mean everybody else is doing well? Um, so it's really important to support these students again, as I say, and to not let yourself be gaslit and become morally bankrupt. Uh, it's very easy issue, and how much force and energy and money the establishment throws into gaslighting people into not recognizing that this is a really basic moral issue is just more of an example of how corrupt uh, this system is. Um, it is a system that is literally trying to justify genocide. So it's not redeemable. Uh, so I'm glad the students are doing this. The Columbia and Harvard students have set it off, not only across the United States, but across the world now, around the world, students, and it's it's a stronger BDS movement because of it. And as the article says, don't we can't fall for small concessions like them saying, "Okay, we're willing to negotiate, so everybody go back to their campus dorms." No, stay, keep struggling, because negotiating isn't the answer entirely. The answer is divestment. When they're saying they're going to put it up to a vote, it's like, who's going to vote for it? Obviously, the majority of people that are invested in are going to vote to keep supporting investing in it, you know? So these are things we have to think about. It just gives a great example of how making everything a commodity and capitalizing on everything is ghoulish, and it's not in the best interest of the people. Colleges should not be investing in arms. Colleges shouldn't be investing in anything. Colleges should be 100% free for the students, no questions asked, period. Uh, just like any other education. And all education should be equally as good all across the board for everybody. Um, these state divisions are actually create more of a division between people that are working class that have more in common, that can agree on more, but separate each other between like party lines, which is ridiculous. United States of America, right? Uh, so yeah, this is a great article. It's so long though. I wish they would have gotten to the conclusion in the last this one. This was really important. Beware the administration's bureaucratizing tactics, toothless promises, secret negotiations, stalling and handpicking student leaders. That's a really important one. Uh, yeah, and I'm so happy that PSL is in the forefront of supporting the students and helping them organize. That's great. Huge win. Huge win, I think. I think long term, yeah, history will look back on this decade, and it'll see capitalism for what it is, just like the Vietnam War. just like the apartheid before. Um, it's just crazy that people keep falling for this, like war after war, struggle after struggle. We keep ending back in capitalism for the last century now. It's a totally ghoulish system. It really is, because we're really exploiting the whole rest of the world just for America to maintain its supremacy, which is gross. Okay. All right. We can do better than that. We have the resources, we have the manpower. We don't need to get money involved. It really is unnecessary. You can live off of resources and labor. You can't live off of money itself. Cool. Let me see what else is out here. The war, news clip rejects absurd. All right. Got all that read. All righty. Well, let me flash this here and make sure it's nothing different. I'm not missing any newbies. Nope. Everything's good. All right. So I want to thank everybody. This was a long one. It was a long read, lots to read, but it's necessary, especially for me. I've learned a lot from reading all this. Hopefully others can listen to it, comment on it if you have any questions, and I'll get back to your comments when possible. If you decide to join me on a live one, always feel free to comment and chime in. All right. And if you feel like supporting Liberation News or PSL, feel free to check out the description links and donate to them because they're doing great work. Right. And I am not affiliated with them. I am just reading this for my own learning experience, journaling, assessing, and personal growth. And I hope it reaches other people. Another shout out for me personally is to Stoicism in general. If you find yourself stressed, you find yourself not being able to deal with all this anxiety of the world, the depression, look into Stoicism perhaps as some sort of mental therapy kind of hobby where you learn to calm yourself and be a little more stoic and be a stoic leftist. Cool. All right, everybody have an excellent